Good evening. I would like to call to order the City of Lake Forest District 67 Board of Education meeting for May 26, 2015. Welcome to all of our audience members. We're glad you're here. Could we have a roll call, please, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Borkowski.
Here.
Mrs. Clemenson.
Here.
Mrs. Sands.
Here.
Mr. Folker.
Present.
Dr. Lemke.
Here.
Mr. Novitt. Mr. Ford.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the President's Report. Before I start that, I'll say that I brought a toy for us tonight, a Newton's Cradle, and there'll be 2 points during tonight's meeting where that's relevant. And for those of you who stay till the very end of the meeting, you can see if you can figure out the 2 points that it's relevant. So the President's Report. First, I'd like to again welcome our 3 newest board members, Tom Ford, Suzanne Sands, and Kent Novitt. Each of them brings unique and valuable skills to our board, and we're fortunate to have such great people joining the District 67 board. So welcome to each of you. As our superintendent has said, anytime one new person joins a board, it becomes a new board with its own set of characteristics, skill sets, and personalities. With 3 new members joining at one time, that statement certainly is currently true for our board. While it's accurate to say we have 3 new board members, I think it's more accurate to say that we have an entirely new team. With that in mind, I'd like to share a few thoughts on the role of our board and what a well-functioning board might look like. Many of us have heard a variety of topics, a variety of analogies and perspectives related to this topic. For example, the Illinois Association of School Boards, which effectively serves as our trade association, promotes the balcony and the dance floor model of governance. Personally, I find this model to be inadequate. As my predecessor once said, the balcony framework suggests that we, as board members, should sit in the cheap seats, keep our mouths shut, applaud at what is presented, and go home, happy to have even seen the show. That model does not describe our role to me, given our legal and fiduciary responsibility. In my mind, that model does not align with the oath we each took when joining the board. Another analogy that gets mentioned is that of a corporate board. While there are many similarities, this analogy is not perfect either. As Mike Simic recently commented, a director on the Ford Motor Company's board is not regularly asked by people at the grocery store why the production at plant number 4 was shut down for 3 hours, or what are the qualifications of a manager being hired. But we do get those questions from our community members. So is there a model that does fit, that can be useful as we consider our role, and even as we start to consider our goals and objectives for the board and for the district for the next year? One construct that I find helpful is that of a pendulum swinging along a spectrum. As you can see on the screen, at one end of the spectrum, we have what I'm calling a passive board. You might think of the term rubber stamp with regards to this type of board. At the other end, we have what I'm calling an overly active board. This type of board is getting quite involved in the day-to-day management of district work, which is really the job we pay our administrators to do. If we look back over the past 20 years, I'm confident we could find examples of both of these type of boards here at District 67. We could probably even identify moments in time when the pendulum was swinging from one end to the other. My objective, however, is not to look backwards, but rather to describe a place where we might want our board to land. In this model, I define equilibrium as appropriately collaborative. Collaborative suggests that we are working together with our administrators, teachers and staff, parents, and community stakeholders. Appropriate means we are doing so in a way that is valuable, meaningful, and fulfilling our fiduciary responsibilities, while respecting that our administrators have been hired and are paid to be the smartest people in the room when it comes to educational matters. So what might this appropriate collaboration look like in more practical terms? For me, it means that we are constantly asking questions while our administration team is primarily tasked with recommending the possible solutions for us to consider. And there are 2 questions that I feel we should be asking about virtually every recommendation that we consider. Question number 1, how does this action affect the students? At the start of the day and at the end of the day, that's why we're all here, to serve the children. While considering the impact on parents, teachers, staff, community members, and even the board itself may be interesting and important at times, a student-centric philosophy is worth considering and one that I hope to follow. The second question to ask at every turn in my mind is this: is the action being considered moving us closer to achieving our district mission and vision? I don't view the vision and mission that we defined last year as a theoretical pie-in-the-sky concept that cannot be achieved anytime soon. I view it as a tangible goal, a school system that I want my children, current fourth graders, to experience, not just future generations. So asking at every turn if we're accelerating towards the vision or not is top of mind for me. Providing a constant sense of urgency, even healthy impatience, regarding achieving the mission and vision is an area where the board can provide great value in an appropriately collaborative manner. There are certainly many other excellent questions we should be asking. Are we spending the taxpayers' money optimally? Are we being as transparent as possible? Are we communicating effectively with all stakeholders, especially parents and teachers? All of these and many others are excellent questions and well aligned with the appropriately collaborative model. We should not stop with the 2 questions posed above, but rather they are meant as good starting points and themes to consider. By pursuing a true student-centric philosophy and having a laser-like focus on achieving the vision mission sooner rather than later, we will be serving our community extremely well. Working collaboratively in this manner with our outstanding team of administrators, teachers, parents, and community partners, I am both confident and excited about what we collectively might accomplish in the coming months and years. That concludes the President's report. The next item on our agenda is the Superintendent's report. Mike Simic.
Thank you, Mr. Borkowski. And I can't tell you how nice it is to report that we have, this is the last meeting of a very, very successful school year for District 67. And no school better represents that success than the folks that are in the room tonight. And I've told you privately, and it's really a pleasure to tell you publicly, how incredibly impressed and incredibly proud I am of the work that you all have done collectively, collaboratively, all of you together. It took leadership on the part of teachers and leadership on the part of your building principal to make that happen. And the report later tonight is really a celebration of one of the best stories that anybody could hope to tell in the education industry, frankly, because a year ago, we were in a very, very different place, and you may remember some of those meetings that we had, as actually it was more like meeting after meeting after meeting, but that's a different story. And then to arrive at a place today where you can really talk about with great pride all of the various things that you've done over the course of the school year. And it has not been perfect, and it was never intended to be perfect, and I've really enjoyed watching that take place. And I've particularly enjoyed watching and hearing from kids on how they've been impacted by this. And not only do we get to celebrate the Inspiration Block Year 1 program evaluation and how all that's gone, but we celebrate 2 fabulous years of leadership from Kelly Jackson and mourn her departure, but are glad that it happened and sad that it's over. But also, one of the really exciting things also in the course of a school's life, and that is to bring another principal on board that will add a new dimension to the work and new excitement, and really bright guy, and one of the unusual things to have a male elementary principal too, which is kind of a cool thing. It's like going to be one guy in the building every day for sure. So our school climate survey, the teams in each of our schools are working really hard on that. We've completed that, and that's been given over to the building teams, and they're very hard at work on that. Really happy to report, and this is from Mrs. Hermes and Mrs. Taradis. The online registration has just launched, and we already have 200 families that have taken advantage of that. And that's one of those things that is not necessarily the most exciting thing to talk about, online registration. It is amazingly complex to pull that off. It requires everybody under the sun within the organization to participate in it. And then it has to go technologically seamlessly in its rollout. And after hearing from parents who enroll kids in 67 and have a child at 115, and how complex all of that paperwork is to get that done, it is really gratifying to actually hear nothing about how it's going, which means it's going really well. That's the sign. Silence is a very good thing. June 1st, we have graduation, certainly one of the highlights of our year when we send off our students. One of the points that I made at in a recent superintendent's report is that in the course of a student's 13 years, the high school gets all of the credit or lack thereof for ACT scores, when in fact 9/13 of those scores are directly linked to what happens in our district, in District 67. And so that's something that is very easily overlooked. But those 9 years are the critical years, I would say, for all of the success that we have at our high school. We also have some things to celebrate from our students. Our students put together their heads, and they presented to the Spirit a grant that turned out to be a $70,000 wellness area grant. Every single student that comes through the district will benefit from this new play area. It's going to have basketball, of course. If you go to Deer Path right now, what you'll see are two basketball hoops. Two basketball backboards, one of which has a hoop. Okay, to be clear. And so this is a very tired area, and students that came through the district in the 70s say that it looks just like when they were in school. So this is something that they put together, and very impressively, the Spirit said it was probably the best grant they'd ever seen. They collaborated with the city. They worked with the school staff. They got teachers signed on to do this, and these are some of our graduating 8th graders that participated in that. We also have something else to be very happy about from Deer Path. We have the Deer Path Dash on June 8th, which will raise a lot of money and awareness for leukemia. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you. We now come to public participation. The Board of Education welcomes public participation at all of its meetings. The purpose of public participation is for any member of the public to address the board on any topic, although we do encourage the topic to be related to District 67 matters. It is hoped that by utilizing the following guidelines, participation will be maximized in terms of fairness, organization, and effectiveness. If a member of the public would like to address the board, they should come to the microphone and state their name and address before addressing the board. Each person will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. Everyone has a right to be heard respectfully. Members of the public will not be allowed to speak a second time until all members of the audience who wish to speak have been allowed to do so once. We do ask that public comment not be redundant and that all comments should be directed to the board and not the audience. In order to provide accurate responses, questions posed to the board during public comment will be listened to and taken under advisement, but generally not answered in this venue. The public is always encouraged to meet with school officials to receive information, discuss ideas, or express concerns. Finally, if a member of the public has any letters or other written materials, those may be handed to the board clerk for public record. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the board at this time? Seeing none, I did that long speech for no reason. We now move to reports and discussions. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Borkowski. As mentioned earlier, we have our Inspiration Block Year 1 program evaluation from Mrs. Jackson and Mrs. Fagel. I'm really pleased to invite you back after an exciting year.
It's good to be back. At the start of the current year, Cherokee embarked on the implementation of the first year of a 2-year pilot of the Inspiration Block. Students in kindergarten, 3rd, and 4th grades were offered a choice between an inquiry-based learning block and a language acquisition block to study science and social studies content. While standards studied remained aligned for the 2 blocks, the approach was different to instruction. Students in the inquiry block learned science and social studies according to a project-based learning format. Units began with a driving question and an entry event from which students were able to research, question, and explore content, eventually presenting findings and recommendations to community members. Students in the language acquisition block worked on building proficiency in Mandarin while learning content in science and social studies. Classes were taught in the Mandarin language, and students were asked to use the Mandarin language to explore, question, and communicate. This year, all students at Cherokee have been inspired by our new Inspiration Block, as have teachers, as you can see tonight, administrators, and the community. As we evaluate the success of the first year of the Inspiration Block, we'll look at 3 areas to show that this format has met our goals of improved culture and climate, consistency and achievement, and continued development of language proficiency. Lauren will now discuss the results of the comprehensive school climate inventory with respect to climate and culture at Cherokee.
So as Kelly mentioned, we used 3 data points to evaluate the first year of the program. We wanted to evaluate school climate, and in an effort not to be redundant, we used components of the CSCI to draw correlations. And I just want to remind the board something that I've shared previously, is that in education it's almost impossible to draw direct causation. So we really can never say that a new program or a new material caused a certain effect, but we can certainly look for strong correlations and then look to repeat things that we see that are correlated in a positive way. So in the school connectedness and engagement dimension, which is one of the 12 dimensions measured by the CSCI, we had a very strong positive response from both parents and students. So one of our goals through this pilot was to reduce the divisiveness in the community and increase satisfaction, and we took this as a strong indicator that the climate had improved. We added this to the anecdotal evidence of our principal, who certainly was on the ground level for the entire school year, working very closely with parents and teachers, and decided that we felt that we had accomplished our goal. Oops. Okay, in terms of our NWA map data, I'm gonna show you 3 quick slices of data in an effort to show you how we feel that the implementation of the Inspiration Block for our students in 3rd and 4th grade in particular, because they take the map test, has not changed. In fact, it's only changed for the better. If we were to draw a correlation, we can see increased performance in MAP with the implementation. Doesn't necessarily mean that this led to the stronger scores, but what we wanted to make sure was that we didn't see any scores going the wrong direction as we implemented this new program. So one slice looks at the mean RIT, so the average RIT score in spring 2014 and spring 2015. And you can see in all 4 areas, grades 3 and 4, reading and math, the mean RIT went up. This is not comparing the same group of kids. This is comparing grade 3 in 2014 to grade 3 in 2015, et cetera. In another slice of MAP data, we looked at the percent of students who are projected to exceed state standards on, which in our state are the Common Core state standards. And again, we see in 3 out of the 4 instances, the percentage of students who were projected using their scores from spring 2014 and spring 2015 projected to exceed state standards went up, with the exception of grade 4 reading. And again, that was such a small decrease, I would say that was statistically rather insignificant. And then finally, a 3rd slice of MAP data, we looked at the percentage of our students who are meeting their growth projection. This is something that we've emphasized a lot, making sure that all of our kids are growing. And again, looking at our 3rd graders in 2014 and our 3rd graders in 2015, the percentage of students meeting their growth projection has increased. So again, we can't draw a direct line, but we feel that we certainly have evidence to support that the implementation of this program did no harm, and certainly could have played a part in leading to increased reading and math performance for our students.
The 3rd area that we wanted to look at was development of language proficiency. The actual APPLE, or Assessment of Performance toward Language, or towards Proficiency in Languages, is an interactive performance-based assessment of language proficiency. Language proficiency can be defined as the ability of a person to use a language for speaking, listening, reading, and writing. It includes fluency, which we often talk about, but it also takes into account accuracy, spontaneity in conversation, vocabulary use, and evaluating the use of memorized phrases or words versus the use of created language. The APPLE aligns with the World Readiness Standards for Language Learning and also measures proficiency across the 3 modes of communication, as long as you're administering in all of the components. We elected, for our purposes, to administer the interpersonal listening and speaking component of the APPLE. And basically what that is the students sit with a microphone in front of the computer and interact with a person in a conversational format. It was administered to 23 students in 4th grade and 34 students in third grade this past April. As we look at the results, we compared those to the results from last year, where a random sample of 13 students in third grade were given the apple, and the percentages fell as 8% in the N1 category, 31% in N2, and 61% in N3. The N stands for novice, and N1 is novice low, N2 and 3 are novice mid, and 4 is novice high. And then from there, the I's stand for intermediate, which means that you're speaking with longer phrases, longer sentences, starting to string sentences together. And you're also aware of tenses. You're able to ask questions as well as answer them, and so on. So if you think of it as an inverted pyramid, it's easy to jump between the novice levels. It gets harder and harder as you go up the proficiency levels to get out of that level, or it takes longer to move beyond that level. So we were really encouraged at this year's results for third grade. We see an increase at N4 and intermediate low there, the yellow and blue blocks, which no students last year, and when we administered the apple to third grade, scored in too. So that shows us that we are doing a decent job there. We also see the fourth graders' results from this year, some of whom were in the group from last year. And this group also shows us growth, reductions at N1, N2, and N3, and an increase at N4, I1, and I3 even. So based on these results, we can say that our students continue to increase in proficiency and that the language block has supported the continued development of language proficiency through this year. We believe that the first year of the Inspiration Block has been a success for our teachers, for our parents, and most of all, for our students. It's clear that the Inspiration Block also aligns to the District 67 mission to inspire and empower all students to maximize their growth as learners and develop a balanced sense of self, steadfast resiliency, and a deep respect for others. Looking forward to the 2015-16 school year, we recommend the implementation of the second year of the 2-year pilot of the Inspiration Block according to the format displayed on the screen. We would like to thank the Board of Education, instructional leadership team, faculty, community, and parents for their supportive roles in this first year and for their consideration of further implementation in the years to come. Any questions?
Any questions from the board members?
Yeah, I'll take a couple. Go back to your data, Kelly. What I'm wondering with that is, last year we did a random sample of 13.
Yeah.
From now on, we're going to test everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
In third and fourth grades.
That's what these numbers are.
Right. Last year,
Okay.
it was just, it was a random sample just to try it out and see how the test would work too in
Yeah.
third grade. So.
And then the real question I have is, so the powers that be, whoever that is, I don't know, Apple or somebody else, I mean, I would think we would want to pick one of those rows and say, this row or better means we're succeeding, and this row or better means we're not. I really have no idea if that's N4 or N2
Right.
for this level. And so,
I think when we looked at designing the curriculum for third and fourth grade, and we based it on what the original curriculum had for the partial immersion program. So where did they want to see kids at the end of the fourth grade? And it was really in that novice high, intermediate low range, so those yellow and blue bands. So as we continue to develop the curriculum, our job is to see how we can help students and support students in their language proficiency and start talking even more than they are right now, doing more conversation spontaneously, allowing them opportunities to speak about themselves, about the things around them throughout their days in the classrooms.
I just think it still would be helpful as a board member, I think, to be told for third grade, orange or better is awesome, and for fourth grade, blue or better is awesome. And I actually will let you guys define what awesome is, but something like that would be good. And Lauren, can you go back to your data quickly? I think I know an answer, but I'm not positive.
I thought he was just going to pick on your data, Kelly.
No, you get the tougher one, actually.
I knew it was coming.
So for all that kind of data, all of it, is every third and fourth grader in Cherokee being in those samples?
Yes. This is
Okay.
all students. This is not
I-
just this.
I'm-
So the Inspiration Block was for all students. So when we evaluated the map data, we were looking at all third graders, not dividing them by block.
I guess I would have found it more useful to say, here's here's Sheridan's numbers, here's Everett's numbers, here's Mandarin inspiration block numbers, and here's whatever we're calling the other one, numbers, just to be able to see a little bit more.
I think as we move towards, as the board continues to look towards rolling out the inspiration block to the other schools, that might be some data that can be, it certainly can be looked at that way. Our purpose tonight was just to evaluate year one at Cherokee. So we chose to look at the whole district elementary, you know, to not break it down that way. But certainly those comparisons can be made.
So are you saying that the third and fourth grade numbers that we're looking at are all third and fourth? Those are just Cherokee?
Just Cherokee. Just
And
Cherokee.
have you taken the step to break them out by the two types of inspiration blocks? Because I do agree that that might be an interesting way of looking at it. And then my, I guess, second part of that question is, did you look at second grade where you weren't doing the inspiration block, and were there any meaningful differences with that
and second
data?
grade is a little bit of its own because it's the first year the students take the test. One of the things I shared in our board report is that our map window just closed. So the NWA will not run any district summaries until the window is closed. So even though most of our students had finished testing, they won't run any district summaries. So this is kind of the initial analysis. I think there are so many different things we can do with the map data. We can draw all sorts of possible correlations, and I know that the instructional leadership team, in fact, that's our main agenda item for Thursday, is a data retreat because the window just closed. So I think it would be helpful maybe at an education committee meeting to generate some questions, and that's a great work session for the leadership team to dive into the data because all those different comparisons raise more questions and really healthy conversations. So we'd be really willing to do that.
It might also be interesting to see how this compares relative to previous years. So, hey, this went up, that's great, but previously, has it gone up just as much year over year historically? Suggest if this is, it may actually be worse when you look at historical, I don't know.
Right.
And then relative to the proficiency, do we have a breakdown as to how many of folks who are the students who are in the more proficient levels may speak the language at home, or may have had experience in the country or speaking the language prior? So in other words, is it truly because we're teaching them the language effectively, or is it because they have other outside help?
I don't have that information with me. I mean, certainly if I go down to the student level and look, there may be students who have had experience outside of the country or may have had a situation where they have a native speaker living in their home. The majority of our students don't speak the language at home, so.
You've only got one, so I'm just curious if that might in some way be a result of
Sure.
having the language spoken at home. That's why
Sure.
they're far more proficient. Correct, yeah, and the
Yeah.
one I3 here in the fourth
I3,
grade.
yeah.
Yeah. It would just be interesting to see. I agree with
Definitely.
Rob. It'd be great to say, how do we define success?
Right.
What percent needs to be at N4 or higher
Right.
to feel that you've taken into account those that, yes, were proficient because they may speak it at home, and those that have learned it through the school.
And after this first administration, we do want to break that down even further and define what does it look like for our program and where are we aiming for. So.
I think one thing we're excited about is that the test is established. We have some really solid benchmark data. This is a national exam aligned to national standards. This is we didn't score the test. And so we feel like it's bringing some validity to the changes that we made to the program. I think one of the biggest concerns we heard is that the move away from a partial immersion format would jeopardize the students' language proficiency. And we feel really, really good about where our students are demonstrating proficiency. So it's a start. It's by no means a finish, but I think this is something that Jeff can continue to lead the way on and again, build on the data set. I would just urge you to keep in mind that the data, one piece of data never tells the whole story. But it's exciting. We were really excited on a Friday night when Kelly was texting me, we got the Apple scores and it looks good, so.
And do we use the Apple test for any of the other languages in the district?
I was just going to add that. Actually, we at the high school level, the Apple will be used in the future moving forward for the seal of biliteracy, and that's a statewide program. So we will be using it at the high school for all of the languages for which it's used. We also, in administration of this, are looking to do the same group of kids, so at 4th grade, but then at 6th grade, and then at 8th grade, so every 2 years, just to see how they continue to move up and keep tabs on that movement. And then at the middle school right now, what they're using is the STAMP, which is a different type of Apple test put out by a different company, but eventually the goal is to align and use the Apple for all of the languages to make that comparison to the kids that start early on and then later on in their school career.
Can you talk about the timeline, not what the result is going to be, but the timeline? We're entering year 2 of their 2-year pilot. What does the timeline look like for if it's going to be rolled out and what that might look like?
So, as you've heard us say, basically any decisions made for a school year really should be made in order to do the planning justice. They should be made by December of the preceding year. So our recommendation would be that the board gave us kind of the green light earlier on to go ahead and start having Kelly and her staff start planning. So this summer, again, we have a tremendous amount of curriculum work and staff development that's taking place. And I would say that would be, the evaluation and the conversation and the brainstorming needs to happen in fall. And I would recommend that by winter, a decision is made if this will roll out to the other 2 elementary schools, one or both, and what format that will take. The good news is that both Everett and Sheridan, their leaders and their staff have been doing very inspiration-like activities, inquiry-based, project-based, STEM-based, kind of call it whatever you want. So a lot of the types of learning that's happening in the 3rd and 4th grade classroom, in the kindergarten, in the inquiry block, is already happening. So that's the timeline I would recommend.
Other questions?
One comment. I mentioned a little bit about this last month, but you guys weren't here. In fact, all you guys weren't here last month. But Kelly, to you and to the teachers, this has been a wonderful year. The change has been dramatic, but I've been at Cherokee for 11 years, and this year has stood out as just an amazing year of collaboration, innovation, experiences for the kids. So thank you, tremendous job.
And I want to echo that, and Mike said in his comments and has said throughout that the success of this with Kelly and Lauren's leadership, but it really was the staff, the teachers at Cherokee taking this, owning this, developing this on your time largely after school during summer. So I echo what Jeff said. And knowing that many of you hopefully will be not staying till the end of this meeting since it is a school night and you need to teach our children tomorrow. One of the 2 reasons the Newton's Cradle is here is actually in your honor. The 4th grade teachers probably know that the 4th grade, I believe, made Newton's Cradles. At least that's what my kids told me. So that is there in your honor. And last Friday on our half day, this is an accolade from my children, I guess, as we were driving to school, one of my children informed me that it was a half day and that we don't do much during half days, which is another topic that this board has talked about. The other child responded, maybe we can do inspiration block the entire time, and the other child said that would be pretty awesome. So I thought that was pretty great accolades, really, for all of the staff. So thank you for your work. Mr. Semick, the next report is yours as well.
Thank you, Mr. Borkowski. I'm really pleased to invite Mr. Smith and Nikki Chitwood. Took me a second there. And this is a program that Dr. Wilcox works with. She's very proud of, and really pleased to have one of our most distinguished teachers, and I think one of our future most distinguished teachers in the house today. And Dr. Wilcox, I look forward to you discussing why you're so proud of this.
I am. I'm extremely proud and honored to present Ken Smith and Nikki Chitwood. They're going to share a little bit about a long-standing District 67 program. We have had a mentor program here for many, many, many years. We have some teachers in the audience here who are current mentors. If you're a mentor, would you raise your hand? If you're a protege, would you raise your hand? Okay, so look at the audience here and you see how many people just in this audience are currently touched by this program, let alone people that have been touched through the years. Every new teacher in District 67 is assigned a mentor and advisor, and we have an incredible program to help them get acclimated and grow within our district. We're really proud of it. Every year it evolves. We get feedback from our mentors, advisors, and proteges about how we can make it even better the following year. So Ken and Nikki are going to share a little bit just give you a little insight into what our mentoring experience looks like in District 67.
Well, thank you for having us. Nikki and I are excited to share just a sampling of our mentor-protege journey that we took this past year. It's a program that truly helps, I believe, the district to build and maintain quality educators in a systematic and supportive way. So, there we go. I'd like to begin just with just briefly why I chose to be a mentor, and I think it probably reflects why most people decide to become mentors. You hit a point in your career where you decide it's time to give back. I hit mine about 10 years ago. So I have been offering myself up as a mentor for quite some time, and I can say with absolute certainty that in the amount of time that I've been a mentor, the program has never been at a more efficient nor more meaningful level than it is right now. Let me explain. The program it proceeds in a very deliberate and organized fashion. We have weekly meetings that are the formal meetings. So Nikki and I have met far more than 30 times this year on a formal level, but she's right down the hall, so you could probably triple that to hundreds, or probably hundreds of meetings, sometimes just right in the hallway, which is helpful to be close to your protege. We have observations that are aligned with the Danielson framework. I've done pre-observation meetings with Nikki 3 times a year. We'll do an observation. Oftentimes they're videotaped. And then we have post-observations to reflect on how the lesson went, what could be better, what we can do next time to maybe influence future lessons. We have triannual opportunities for both mentors and proteges to reflect and set goals, which could include taking a half day, setting everything else aside, and just really thinking about the trimester that you just lived through. Where do you want to go from here? And then even on to the next year. What are some things we really want to accomplish that we maybe didn't accomplish this year? And what are some good things that we accomplished? And then we have focus group meetings that are strategically inserted throughout the year so that when we meet, we actually we talk about things that new teachers would be the most important to new teachers. Parent-teacher conferences, classroom management, things that after a while you start to take for granted that, yeah, I've got that, but then you think back to your first year as a teacher. Mine was how to work a phone, so we didn't have a specific one for that. But it really works down, or boils down to this, support. And then I was going to step aside for a moment and let Nikki just kind of give you a personal view of her year as a protege.
Well, I found a really profane quote, mentors matter. A profound quote. He's taught me a lot. But it really does boil down to the support and just all of the opportunities that I've been given to just have him be listening ears and just hear advice and be given support and be pushed and supported just because of the potential he sees in me, which is really gives me so much confidence as a first-year teacher. The partnership that we have just working, right down the hall from each other, and also the impact it has on our students is really cool to see, which kind of goes into my next thing. The most important is just the impact it has on our students and the partnership that goes on in the classroom, whether it's collaborating together with different levels of LA or activities that we create together for our students to do. It just really goes outside the classroom walls, and it's an awesome opportunity to work with somebody who supports me so much and gives me so much advice and makes me feel like it's okay the mistakes that I make, or if I'm not sure about things. So that's what I think the whole mentor program really boils down to, is, like he said, support. Your turn.
Back to me. One of the nice things that we do is we really emphasize reflection. We do that with our students, so we have to obviously walk the talk. And one of the things that we do is a 4-3-2-1. So we sit down at the end of a trimester. It could be on that half day when we're together. It could just be in solitude somewhere. And we think about 4 things that we've learned, 3 ideas we want to share, 2 actions that I'll take immediately, and 1 additional thing I want to learn. Each of us do this. Each of the mentors do this. The proteges all do this as well. And in those moments, sometimes I come up with ways that I actually benefit as much as Nikki does from the whole program. So I was just going to share something that's personal from a 4-3-2-1. I'll share an excerpt from it. I'll just give you the 4. I won't go through the 3, the 2, the 1. But this, even though I'll be talking about Nikki and myself, I think this would probably be the same experience for most people. So this was at the end of the first trimester after working with somebody who's been a teacher for about 12 weeks. I sat and thought for myself, 1, I learned that trying to push forward too many agenda items results in a watered-down result. Better to refine and focus initiatives and go into depth rather than skimming the surface. 2, I learned that Nikki has a better feel for what to prioritize in her teaching life after having lived through a trimester. This means that we set priorities together in a more meaningful and collaborative way than at the start of the year. 3, I learned that I need to be a better listener. It's tempting to try to provide as many answers as I can, but more often than not, listening, not talking, is a better way to arrive at meaningful answers. And 4, and maybe most importantly for me, is I learned that I need to adapt and refresh my own style. Nikki approaches teaching with dozens of new and fresh ideas that can enhance my own teaching and benefit my students in ways that I've never before considered. I think that probably sums up the program best. It's not only the protege who's positively influenced, it's the mentor, and the greatest beneficiaries are the students, which is as it should be. So we thank you, and if you have any questions.
Questions from the board?
Yeah. One person that I can't not thank is Mina Zimmerman. She's not here this evening, but I see a lot of head shaking. She puts her heart and soul into this program and supports every mentor, every advisor, and every protege. So she's the coordinator for the program, and 7 days a week she is prepared to answer emails and phone calls and help any member of this program at any time. So we really do owe her just an enormous thank you. Next year will be her last year, and again, the program has really grown and evolved under her leadership.
Are there questions or comments from board members?
I wanted to ask a couple questions. These might be for you, Dr. Wilcox. How is there training that's provided to the mentors prior to entering in a mentoring program, or do we sort of rely on each mentor to kind of bring their own style to it?
Good question. Yeah, again, through the years, it's been set up differently. There has been very formal training. The last couple of years, we have given an entire day for the mentors, and we ask them to attend that. They're also available when we have our new teacher meetings, so that's when they start. There also are a few meetings throughout the course of the year, that are just for mentors to come together and have conversations. So it is a very a well-oiled machine that continually evolves, but absolutely there's training involved.
And then what about sort of the mentors and the mentees? Do we ever get them together to sort of collaborate? You know, this is what we're experiencing in our relationship. If you dealt with anything, to kind of share across the whole program.
Yes. Yeah, well, some of these, I mentioned earlier, the focus group meetings, those are perfect examples of that. We want to make sure that they're as meaningful as possible. When I say that we're at a spot right now probably that exceeds anything that I've ever experienced, that's part of it, is it's meaningful. It's not just, okay, here are the things the checklist of things that proteges need to know. We actually, we'll get feedback from the proteges and try to help develop the program as we go along and meet with them. We've done role playing with them. We've had them do role-playing with us. We try to make it as interesting and informative and meaningful and purposeful as possible so that when they walk out of there, they feel more empowered. So, yeah.
And then how long does your relationship, how many years do you keep in relationship with one another?
Sure. Well, I've applied, with Nikki, for instance, I apply each year. And then it's up to the administrator in the building. to decide, who he wants to place with whom. It's a 2-year commitment, though I applied again. I'll be stunned if I don't work with Nikki again and disappointed. And part of it is the advantage that we have is that we work right next door to each other anyway. So there are things that come up on a daily basis where we don't need a weekly meeting. Whether we're working together on the mentor-protege relationship, we're gonna rush next door anyway and touch base. But it's just nice to know if you have that 2-year commitment for both her and me, I think. Yeah.
And we also, it's really a tiered approach. We have mentors for our year 1 first-year teachers. We have a year 2 mentor program, and each of these has different components. And then we have an advisor program, which is still, it's still got meetings and conversation, but not as many observations, not as many 4-3-2-1s. So that's for our more experienced staff that we hired. We still want them to have the opportunity to work closely with an experienced teacher in the district, and again, have that partnership, but it's just a little bit different than our first-year teachers.
It's a compliment to both of you, and then a question. I've been in Nikki's room a number of times this year, and one of the things that is particularly difficult is to have somebody walk in the room and then completely throw you off. And I think it's a compliment to your work together, but most especially to you, Nikki. Nothing changes. The kids don't look up. You don't look up. And that's exactly how it should be. And there's always really good stuff going on in there. But I've heard a question for you, because I've heard this a number of times. I wanted to ask each of you who learned the most this year, because I heard it might be Mr. Smith.
One word, me. I have.
No, I think my last statement there about the, it's easy after you've taught for a long time just to get stuck doing the same thing. And that's one of the things that I benefit equally, I think, because she comes up with ideas all the time. This next year, I plan on taking many more of them, so.
And I also wanted, Mr. Smith, thank you very much for volunteering to participate in this. It really is important that our new teachers are really great people like you working with them, and it's a compliment to both of you that you've made it work so well, so thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is board committee reports. We'll start with the Board of Education Committee, led by Beth Clemenson.
The Education Committee has not met since our last board meeting. Our next meeting will be on June 3rd, Wednesday, which is a new day of the week for us, Wednesday, June 3rd at 8:15 a.m. here at West Campus. The agenda for the meeting is to recap key accomplishments of this school year and articulate our priorities for the coming school year, as well as transition administratively from Assistant Superintendent Mrs. Fagel to Mr. Rogers.
Any questions for Beth? Our next committee report is the Board Finance and Operations Committee, led by Rob Lemke.
Thanks, Mike. The Finance and Operations Committee met at 8:30 on May 19th with Kent and Tom and myself as board members, Richard Chung and Paul Darling as community members, and then we were joined by Ellen and Lauren and Kathy and Brittany and Carol. We began by welcoming Kent and Tom to the committee. It was announced that the committee would conduct its business in such a manner that welcomes public comment on each agenda topic as the meeting progresses. We then discussed the committee charter and agreed to make some minor changes to better represent the committee's business. The full board will be voting on the new charter later this evening. With the help of Brittany and Lauren, Ellen then gave an overview of the budget highlights that will be presented to the committee later this summer and eventually to the full board in September. The educational initiative items that received particular attention were the possible expansion of the Inspiration Block, the adoption of the new master schedule at DPM, the additional support needed for our push-in model of special education service delivery, teacher training for math recovery and advanced math recovery, and professional development regarding the Lucy Calkins curriculum. In terms of facility improvements, Alan and Carol reviewed the upcoming costs regarding life safety improvements, the replacement of tile and carpet at Cherokee and Sheridan, roof replacements and enhancements in all buildings, and additional spending on 21st century learning spaces and furniture. The committee then reviewed the custodial contract, which will also be voted on later this evening, and heard verbal updates on the food service contract and district investigations into the dental and flexible spending benefits. The meeting ended by agreeing to an 8 o'clock to 9:30 a.m. meeting time on Tuesdays or Thursdays for the upcoming year. Exact meeting dates have not been agreed to, but the schedule of meeting topics will be as follows. In July or August, we will review the tentative budget proposal. September will be the discussion of the district fees, including food and transportation charges. October, November, the tax levy and an update on the 5-year budget projection. January, we'll meet with our external auditors and discuss the audit. February, March, we will receive a mid-year budget update, and May discuss upcoming budget priorities, including educational and facility initiatives, along with any other business Alan throws our way. And the meeting adjourned at 10 o'clock.
Any questions for Rob? Our next committee report is the Policy Committee, chaired by Jeff Folker.
The Policy Committee has not met since our last meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, June 2nd, here at the West Campus at 8:30.
Questions for Jeff? The next committee report is the Compensation Committee. Rob Lemke will give that report.
God, I've never spoken this much. The Compensation Committee. I've never spoken this much in committee reports. In questioning people, I've spoken this much. But the Compensation Committee began at 1:30 with Alan, Mike Barkowski, and Mike Simic and myself were in attendance. The meeting began with a discussion of the compensation data that was collected from our list of comparable school districts. The committee was then presented a preliminary recommendation of staff raises for the upcoming year. Various issues were discussed, with particular emphasis on some open positions, such as the principal of Cherokee. If we could find such a person, that would be great. Even though I guess we found a left-hander, which kind of bothers me. But and a left-hander named Jeff, that's right. Yeah. We also discussed the importance and difficulty of determining compensation comps for certain positions, such as the Director of Buildings and Grounds and the Director of Technology. The meeting ended with a few suggestions for improving the style of the comp spreadsheet in preparation for sharing the comparable data and compensation proposals to the full board, which happened earlier tonight. And in order so I don't have to talk so much, going forward, the Compensation Committee will be chaired by one Tom Ford. And so my final meeting adjourned at 2:30.
Questions for Rob? We now move on to liaison reports. The first liaison report is of the governing board of the North Shore Special Ed District, and Suzanne Sands is our rep on NSSED. Suzanne?
The NSSED Leadership Council, as it's now called, met on May 13th. And the first thing I wanted to share was that one of our own, Charlie Beeson, an LFHS student and former District 67 student, was honored at that meeting as one of their Kinnett Scholarship recipients. And these scholarships are granted to students in affiliated districts who are either special education students pursuing further education through college, vocational school, or post-secondary programs, or students planning on pursuing a college degree in special education. Charlie plans to attend Caldwell College and major in special education. Also, up for discussion on the agenda at that meeting was a follow-up meeting that the NSSED administrators had on May 4th with District 67, 115, and District 65 administrators to continue a discussion that had started in January. It included talking about NSSED moving toward a fee-for-service model rather than their current combination of membership fees, retained idea funds, and fee-for-services. Some possible changes to each aspect of that model were discussed at the meeting. The possibility of increasing non-member surcharges were discussed. Long-term financial projections were discussed. Possible financial impacts of two districts, District 112 and 109, possibly withdrawing from the cooperative, as they've announced an intention to do, were discussed, as well as the new billing structure for the FY16 year. And when this was shared at the NSSED meeting, their superintendent said that all of these things could be considered and further explored in their finance committee, and they mentioned that they would appreciate having representatives from Lake Forest and Lake Bluff on the finance committee in order to further explore those ideas. A preliminary budget was presented, and I have that. It was balanced to share with anyone who would like to see the detail of that. There was a tuition and service rate changes summary given to us as well, which if you are interested in seeing the detail of that, I can provide that as well. And a long-term maintenance and capital plan is in the works. Finally, the other big news from NSSED is they are embarking on a new superintendent search. Their superintendent will be leaving at the end of June 2016 with a new person taking that leadership spot in July 1st. And the search committee got permission to begin negotiating a contract with the executive search firm who's going to assist them in that process.
Thanks, Suzanne. Any questions regarding NSSED for Suzanne? Our next liaison report is formerly known as Illinois Association of School Boards EdRed. We've actually renamed it to Legislative Liaison and broadened the role, and Beth Clemenson heads that up.
There is no report this month.
Thank you. Our next report is...
Report is that we've changed our name.
The next report is the Spirit of 67 Foundation, Suzanne Sands.
So I get to talk a little more. So the Spirit of 67 Foundation met for their final time in this school year on May 12th. And during that meeting, retiring board members were recognized for their service. Martha Zeman was also recognized as this marked the end of her 2-year term leading that organization. Molly Sarver is taking over as the new Spirit of 67 Foundation president. The success of this year's home tour was discussed. The home tour was held on May 7th. It was a beautiful day, which meant ticket sales almost doubled on the day of the tour. And the event revenue is expected to be around $80,000 when all is said and done, which exceeds the budgetary goals for that event this year. The budget was discussed for the foundation. As of April 30th, administrative expenses were under budget and revenue was expected to exceed goals. And the foundation has collected over $117,000 in donations from over 520 families in the district this year thus far. Again, the grants were discussed at the last meeting, but I wanted to bring the descriptions of all the grants to your attention. I have them available for anyone who would like to see them. They are also available on the Spirit Foundation website. If you're interested, grants for the next school year are in the amount of $209,305, and that includes the wellness and recess outdoor space at DPM that Mike referred to earlier, as well as a reimagined Cherokee Inspiration Zone utilizing their current IRC space, and a new visiting science program that will be at all of the elementary schools. Those are just a couple highlights of some of the things included in this year's grants. And that is the Spirit of 67 Foundation report.
Thank you. Questions for Suzanne? Our next report is the APT Exec Committee. Jeff Folker.
Thank you, Mike. I had the privilege of attending the annual Old Board, New Board Executive APT Board meeting on Wednesday, May 13th at Authentico. It was a very nice luncheon. Mr. Simic was in attendance, as were many of the administrators and building principals. Allison CK is ending her 2-year leadership as Executive Board President and handed the gavel over to incoming President Julie Passanato and thanked all outgoing members of the board. I won't go into that. I know Leslie has talked about that in previous meetings. One thing that I did discuss with Julie was they would like to continue the tradition of having board members be assigned to individual buildings and being available to provide insight and updates and reports. So board members that are interested in helping out in that regard, they would certainly love to have us engaged in that way. So that's it. The next meeting is in September.
Questions for Jeff?
Yeah. So, are we going to assign board members to different meetings? And I didn't quite understand the last comment about board members to schools.
So we've I guess last year Leslie had asked some of us to, or we volunteered to attend individual building meetings on an as-needed basis. I know I went to Everett a couple of times. We went to Cherokee. Some other people may have gone to Sheridan. So they thought that was great, that they could have kind of a board member that, beyond just the board liaison reports, that if there was a question or if they could invite you to come and talk about a particular topic, they kind of had someone who knew the school a little bit. So that was something they felt strongly about. Starting out, I think Julie's perspective is, why don't we just kind of keep with one liaison at the beginning, and then maybe later in the year or even next year we can do the rotation like we did this past year.
So will you coordinate the school idea?
I will coordinate all of that, yes. You got it.
You just keep on talking.
Unless you.
Any other questions for Jeff regarding the APT? We now move to the action items. Unless there's any great disagreement, I'm actually going to reorder the action items in consideration of our audience members who have jobs to go to tomorrow. We're going to move the approval of the human resources items to the top of the list and cover that first. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Borkowski. I'm very pleased to introduce to the community and to the board Mr. Jeff McHugh, and hit a couple of the highlights about Jeff. He's got a bachelor's degree from the University of Illinois. Rah, rah, over there we go. Okay, we got that behind us.
Where did he go to school?
He's left-handed, and his name is Jeff. Yeah, University of St. Francis in Joliet. He received a Master's of Education in Elementary Education. He's got a library information degree from University of Illinois, also in Urbana-Champaign. You may have heard of that. And finally, a specialist degree from National Louis in Administration and Supervision. He's worked in Arlington Heights his entire career, at first as a second grade teacher, then in the library, where the library became the hub of the building. He was an assistant to the principal in summer school, and then very importantly, the last couple of years he's been in central office as a designated position as a teaching and learning facilitator, so bringing all the teachers together and working with them and doing all sorts of things. So that is not actually as exciting as some of the stuff that I heard from background checks on Mr. McHugh. So talk to a large number of people. We also have contacts that happen to know him in Arlington Heights, and everything that came back from every direction was some sort of superlative. From one supervisor who had been in every building and every classroom in the district numerous times, said, look, there's one classroom that always jumps out when I go on building tours, and it's always Jeff's, every single year, every single time. Another person said, it's about as big a compliment as you can give anybody that works with kids, said he is absolutely magical with kids. And finally, even though Mr. McHugh has not been a building principal before, as an assistant or a building principal, very high compliment from another of his supervisors, said, look, if we took all of the people that we'd ever met in the course of our career and said, look, there are only one or two of them that could make the leap, that would do it successfully from where they currently are to being a building principal, Jeff would be one of those two people. So there is just a tremendous amount of excitement and energy. It's a great day in the life of a school to welcome a principal, especially somebody with the kind of enthusiasm and experience that you have. So welcome on board, Jeff.
Okay, I didn't think I'd win this award, so I didn't prepare anything. You know, the biggest thing that jumped out to me about Lake Forest was this is already a great school district, but they just keep trying to get greater. We just keep trying to get greater. And I found that in every step of the interview process, I left there with my expectations just getting higher and higher, my hopes getting higher and higher, because from talking to cabinet, from talking to the staff and the parents, from looking on the website and seeing what the mission and vision is for the district, the student-led piece, the student ownership of learning, the high expectations for kids, the focus on the whole child, the innovation going on. These are all parts of my core beliefs as an educator, and I was looking at this as this was such a perfect match, and I was just really hoping that Cherokee would see that. And to my great honor and privilege, they did. So I am just so excited to be joining the incredibly dedicated staff, this wonderful central office we have here, and from all accounts, a fabulous board that I've heard. But really the kids in this community and the parents. I just can't wait to get in there and meet each and every one of them, and I really look forward to being part of the family.
So don't sit down. I've always found it odd. Robert Rules of Order actually calls us to do a first and second motion and then have discussion and questions. So I'm going to ask is there a motion to approve the HR agenda item?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And now, is there any questions or discussion for Jeff or otherwise related to the HR report?
Your speech was recorded, right? So we can play it back in a few years.
I'm just going to ask him how you say hello in Mandarin to see if he knows the answer. But
I just memorized that for the interview.
See no other questions. Could we have a roll call vote, Madam Clerk, please, on the motion to approve the human resources items as presented?
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Mr. Borkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Folker?
Yes.
Mrs. Clemenson?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Yes.
Mrs. Sands?
Yes.
Dr. Lemke?
yes.
Motion carries.
One last thing, on behalf of Cherokee and our Emotional Wellness Committee, we are all proudly wearing our shirts, and we wanted to give you one to welcome you to our staff. So
Thank you very much. Congratulations. It's hard to follow that, but we will now move to the approval of the custodial contract renewal. Mike or Alan or Jen, did you want to comment on that? Thank you all very much for coming, by the way. Who would like to give 30 seconds on the custodial contract renewal? Alan?
I'll take that one. A bid for contracted cleaning services was conducted in April of 2014 and awarded to GCA Services Group. The structure of the bid is that it's a one-year contract, so it ran from July 1 of 2014. It expires this June 30th. But it was structured in a way to allow for up to 4 one-year renewals if we can mutually agree on any increase that would be involved. So GCA has requested a 2% increase for the 15-16 school year. That amounts to a $9,078 increase in the overall contract, which will be $462,993. GCA's been in the district. I came in '06. They predate my arrival in the district, so at least probably 10 to 15 years. We've been happy with their service. There's been a lot of stability even though actually the company was sold, there's been a lot of stability in the staff in the district, and that's to our benefit. So we recommend approval as presented. Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve the custodial contract renewal?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion regarding this item? Seeing none, may we have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Folker,
Aye.
Mrs. Sands,
Aye.
Mrs. Clemenson,
Aye.
Dr. Lemke,
Aye.
Mr. Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski,
Aye.
Mr. Novit. Motion carries.
Next, we move to approval of policy 895, a second reading. Jeff?
Policy 895 deals with community relations, more specifically parental involvement in the schools. The policy is already in place, and as I mentioned last month, but for the new board members, a little background. This policy contained a paragraph regarding a Bring Your Parents to School Day. And it states that on the first Monday in October of each year, students, guardians, and parents and guardians are invited to attend class with their children and meet their teachers and administrators during the school day. While this is a wonderful idea, it was felt that this isn't something that needs to be reflected in policy, as any chance we may fail to do this or decide not to do this would obviously be a violation of policy. So the recommendation of the policy committee was simply to strike this paragraph from policy 895. Otherwise, the policy itself remains unchanged. We did our first reading last month. It was approved. I would recommend that we approve the second reading and just eliminate this one paragraph.
Is there a motion to approve policy 895, as Jeff has explained?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, may we have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Sands,
Aye.
Mr. Ford,
Aye.
Mrs. Clemenson,
Aye.
Mr. Folker,
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski,
Aye.
Dr. Lemke,
Aye.
Mr. Novit. Motion carries.
Next, we move to the approval of the Finance and Operations Charter. Rob, you get to talk some more.
I move that we accept the new charter, and then we'll discuss.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion or questions regarding this?
So we just updated it to reflect current practices, and there's no new information really. If anyone has a question, we're happy to answer it.
Seeing none, may we have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Dr. Lemke,
Aye.
Mr. Novit, Mrs. Clemenson,
Aye.
Mr. Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Folker,
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski,
Aye.
Mrs. Sands.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We now move to the consent agenda. Any item on the consent agenda may be removed for discussion if any board member so chooses. The consent agenda tonight includes the approval of disbursements, payrolls, and financial statements dated April 2015, minutes of a regular meeting April 28, 2015, minutes of an executive session April 28, 2015, approval of a board workshop April 28, 2015, minutes of an executive session May 4th, 2015, minutes of a special meeting May 4th, 2015, minutes of a special meeting election and reorganization May 4th, 2015, and disposal of audio recordings November 29th, 2013. Would anyone like any of those items removed for further discussion? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items as listed?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Clemenson,
Aye.
Mr. Folker,
Aye.
Mrs. Sands,
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski,
Aye.
Dr. Lemke,
Aye.
Mr. Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Novit. Motion carries.
We now move to FOIA requests. We had one this month submitted by J.O. Melis, a non-resident. Next, we move to announcements. We have 4 announcements. Monday, June 1st, 2015 is 8th grade graduation at 5 p.m. at Lake Forest High School West Campus. On Wednesday, June 9th, that's the last day of school, a half day for students. Tuesday, June 23rd is the Board of Education meeting at 7 p.m. right here. And finally, not listed on the agenda, Friday, May 29th is a special event remembering Nurse Patty Dorner. The Everett School community will hold a special ceremony honoring Nurse Patty on Friday, May 29th from 2 to 2:30 p.m. at Everett School. The ceremony will take place outdoors, weather permitting. All are welcome to attend, including former Everett families. All are encouraged to wear green. We are now going to, and Madam Clerk, keep me straight here, we are now going to make a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purposes of discussing collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, deliberations concerning salary schedules of one or more classes of employees. Is that correct? Yes, and we need a motion and a second and a vote on that. So could we have a motion to go to executive session for the purposes that I just read?
So moved.
A second, please.
Second.
Is there a roll call, please, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Novit? Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemenson?
Aye.
We're now in executive session.